Good afternoon. And on behalf of the EPI Foundation, I extend a very warm welcome to everyone who has joined us for today's special event on human-wildlife conflict. I'm John Scanlon, I'm the CEO of the Foundation, and I'm going to spend a few minutes briefly outlining what we have planned for you today. Colleagues, as human populations grow and habitats shrink, human-wildlife conflict is increasing. People and wildlife are competing for space, and this competition is acutely felt when it comes to sharing space with elephants. Newspapers are reporting on conflicts between elephants and humans on an almost daily basis, with people being tragically injured or losing their lives, crops being destroyed, and animals being killed. If we can't find ways to satisfactorily resolve these conflicts, the long-term prospects for elephants are bleak, along with all the benefits they can provide to people, both locally and globally. Governments, conservationists, and local communities are experimenting with various solutions, and the EPI Foundation is helping member countries share knowledge, experience, and technologies on how to prevent and mitigate human-elephant conflict and to achieve harmonious coexistence. We offer a platform through which countries can support each other in finding enduring solutions. Today, we're going to share a film with you on the subject, after which we will hear from some of the world's most experienced and knowledgeable people on the subject. People who've had to deal with these challenges personally and in many ways, be it politically, financially, or technically. We're deeply honored to be joined today by two extraordinary ministers who not only make a massive contribution within their own countries, but who are also extremely active and highly influential in the international sphere, be it on biodiversity, climate change, or tourism, namely Cabinet Secretary Najib Balala of Kenya and Professor Lee White of Gabon. We will also hear from two deeply committed and passionate experts on the subject. Greta Laurie, who leads our work on human-elephant conflict and has special expertise in the Horn of Africa, and Grant Burden, who is our special advisor and who you will see featured in the film. After a series of short presentations, we will have time for your questions, which can be directed to any of our speakers, and I encourage you to use the Q&A box to submit your questions. And we are delighted that our panel will be moderated by one of Africa's leading, our own Dr. Winnie Kiiru. But before we hear from our panelists, we will play the documentary, Living on the Edge, an extraordinary and deeply impactful film that graphically shows the challenges confronting local people, government authorities, and conservationists in dealing with human-wildlife conflict, as well as offering solutions and a way forward. And we're deeply grateful to Black Bean Productions for letting us share this film with you today, and to the Grumeti Fund, which has enabled its production. So colleagues, without further ado, we will now play the film, which will run for about 25 minutes, after which we will move straight to Winnie and our moderated panel discussion. Thank you.
Wow, I found that very powerful and very relevant. I hope everyone watching the film felt the same way. Congratulations to Black Bean Productions and Grumeti Fund for that wonderful film. Good afternoon. My name is Winnie Kiiru from the Elephant Protection Initiative Foundation. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to this special event. For those who joined us a bit late, the welcome address had been done by John Scanlon, the CEO of the Elephant Protection Initiative, and I will not repeat. But today we want to take this one example from Serengeti in Tanzania and find out or discuss how relevant and how typical it is of human-wildlife conflict across the continent. But before we start our conversation, I want to make two kind requests. Please let the world know that we're here discussing this very important event. The relevant handles and hashtags have been displayed on the chat box. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Tweet, retweet, retweet without comment, but please get busy on social media. Let people know that we are here. Request number two, should you have questions, comments that you want to share, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Our team will bring them to my attention and will promise to try and get through many of them. Now we go straight to the session that you're all waiting for. We have great speakers this afternoon. From the EPI, we have Greta Laurie and Grant Barton. Greta is the EPI Foundation's Director of Program Management. She's currently heading the Human-Elephant Conflict Team. Grant Barton, who you saw very much in action in that film, has recently joined the EPI as a Human-Elephant Conflict Team as a technical advisor, and we'll be hearing from them. Then, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will have Professor Lee White from Gabon. Professor White is the Minister of Water, Forest and Environment in Gabon. His country is the stronghold of forest elephants. Thanks to the commitment of his government in conservation and protection of this critically endangered species of African elephants, we still have a good, healthy population left in Gabon. We know conflict between farmers and elephants has become a pressing issue in Gabon, and we look forward to hearing from Professor White, who we think is in traffic now trying to get to an airport, but he will join us at some point. But this moment, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome my Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Najib Balala, who I know has made great effort to be with us this afternoon. Human-wildlife conflict is a serious issue in Kenya, and Minister Balala is leading from the front as Kenya seeks to achieve harmonious coexistence between people and wildlife and sustainable livelihoods for people sharing space with wildlife. Without further ado, I welcome Honorable Balala. I give him a whole 7 minutes to tell us all about conflict, and I know he always keeps time. Welcome, Honorable Balala.
Thank you very much, Winnie. My apologies that I came late. We have a state visit today of our colleague from Tanzania, President Samia Hassan, who is our guest today in Kenya. So we were in State House. We just finished that session. We're going back this evening. But I'm glad to be here. John, thank you very much and congratulations. We are happy that you're back with us. John Scanlon, we were proud of you when you were in CITES, and now you're with us and dealing with reality. It's not just about multilateralism, it's about reality. And I want to congratulate Grumeti Fund. Grant Barton, thank you very much. You really portrayed what's the problem currently. And I want to share with all of you, Winnie, thank you very much. EPI is a dear organization that we willingly partnered as Kenya, and we want to continue because I know the issue of elephants is key. We need to protect, but they're also creating damages to our countries and our people and our economies. But today I'm glad, finally, we have put the challenges of human-wildlife conflict as the forefront of the agenda of conservation. I think the agenda of conservation for a long time has been dominated by poaching, by, again, illegal wildlife trade, and by things like the markets. And now, I can tell you that in Kenya, we have tamed poaching. In 2012, 2013, 2014 was our worst year. And really, we don't want to think backward. Yes, we had almost 135,000 elephants in Kenya. In 1989, we were reduced to 16,000 elephants. And now we have 34,000 elephants and growing. Last year, we had 0 poached rhinos, 2020, and we had only 9 elephants that were poached. And we are trying to be very strict in the issues of anti-poaching programs, also inside job within institutions like KWS. Now we have tamed that. At the same time, we have lobbied very hard in the Far East about closing the markets for ivory and for rhino horns. And we are still lobbying for European Union and Japan to close those markets. The minute the markets are open, there'll be a demand. It's easy to say that we have stockpiles and we want to dispose them, but we need to get money. I think there should be a fund that we get compensated as third world countries or the custodians of elephants, yeah, so that these stockpiles are compensated to us, but we don't sell them in the market. We actually destroy it, so that we don't create another market. So I want to appeal into that. But the key issue here is human-wildlife conflict. So we have managed to tame poaching, but the human-wildlife conflict is going to be the greatest threat to both conservation, but also particularly elephants. And that is an agenda that I took up 2 years ago. Unfortunately, it is more complicated and sophisticated than we can imagine. It's about numbers, it's about huge mammals coming in, and it's about competition between agriculture and wildlife conservation. It's competition about human population explosion. It's again about climate change, and this is what we are suffering. I can tell you in 2017, we got the biggest loss of over 400 elephants because of drought, not because of poaching, because of drought. So these are real things, we must address them, and we must address them now, or in 10 years' time, we will not get the goodwill of the people of Africa. And that's why I want to congratulate EPI and particularly Grant Baden for exposing this. We need to balance, yes, but we need to be sensitive. I can tell you, if an elephant dies or a rhino dies, all choppers of government will be over these areas and arrest will be done. But if a human being is killed with these animals, there'll be no concern of anybody. And this is not acceptable. Human life matters as well. So we need to be sensitive. And I'm glad EPIs through this living on the edge has been shared today, because these are reality. I have a case on my table, a man who lost his only son eaten by a lion. What do you expect that person to think about government? Until today, 5 years later, he's not been compensated. Because we have a backlog of 2014. We have a total of 14 billion Kenya shillings, which is approximately $140 million outstanding backlog up to 2020. So we need to be innovative in terms of fundraising, to create a special fund. We need to be addressing those compensation issues urgently. I appointed a task force through my deputy, Mr. Joseph Boynet, and we in the ministry decided that maybe we should appoint a task force to look at alternative means of financing compensation. And one means was about insurance, but also to pay insurance premiums. And I got us suggested is almost $40 million per year. Who is going to pay for it? At the moment in Kenya, the entire human-wildlife conflict is in front of the government. Nobody is helping us. So it is the responsibility of the government. Even if a human-wildlife conflict occurs in a community conservancy or in a private ranch, it will be the government who has to foot the bill, which the government cannot and is not going to sustain. That's why we have a backlog of $140 million. So this discussion today is very, very, very timely. And yes, we need to discuss this. We need to bring the issue of human-wildlife conflict to the international agenda. I know we are just talking up here within EPI. I know my friend, Professor Lee from Gabon, has also similar challenges, but we need to bring the agenda of human-wildlife conflict, the issue of compensation, the issue of solutions to the numbers of elephants, how much will we carry, the carrying capacity needs to be analyzed. In Kenya, the numbers are growing from 16,000 30 years ago to 34,000. And that cannot be because there is pressure from agriculture, there's pressure from human population. So this agenda must be an international agenda so we can be able to get enough resources to address these issues. Otherwise, we will not get the goodwill of people in Grumeti or people in Masai Mara or people in Savo or anywhere to support elephants or to support conservation if they don't feel they are being protected and they benefit from conservation as well. So Winnie, thank you very much, and I'll be available for any questions. But yes, I appreciate my colleagues in my ministry here. Professor Sigori is here. My team, Erastus Kanga and Ali Kaka are here, and my colleagues in Kenya Wildlife Service are all here. So Kenya is in the forefront to support EPI. Kenya is in the forefront in conservation. We have always been in the forefront as pioneers in conservation, and we will continue. But we need to have a genuine dialogue to create a balance between humans and human beings and conservation. Otherwise, we will lose the goodwill that we have currently. Thank you very much, Winnie.
Thank you very much, Honorable Balala. You bring up very important points that indeed our countries have the burden of looking after this wildlife. And yet, a lot of times we depend on the goodwill of the people to keep these animals alive. And these people are suffering. And the question is, how much can our governments do without the support of the international community? All hands on deck on this one. Thank you very much, Honorable Balala. Now, I must be the luckiest moderator in town because Professor Lee White has just joined right on time, and I will waste no time. I'm going to invite Professor Lee White to give us his views on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm driving in my car to the airport, having just come out of a meeting with 5 ministers talking about exactly this problem. And as my friend, the minister from Kenya just said, if we don't have the support of the people, we cannot achieve what we are trying to achieve in terms of biodiversity conservation. In Gabon, it's strange. In Gabon, because of the poaching issues, even though we have half the forest, the surviving forest elephants, we've lost 1/3 of our elephants in the last 15 years. We had a tragedy in northeast Gabon, and in Kebbi, we lost about 20,000 elephants over a period of 10 years. We've now stabilized that, but we have fewer elephants, but the human-elephant conflict issue seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. And the elephants are coming in closer and closer to people, coming into villages, but coming into towns, coming into areas just 30 or 40 kilometers outside of our capital city, Libreville. So we're wondering, why is the human-elephant conflict getting so bad to the point where I'm summoned regularly to Parliament, and I have members of Parliament who are desperate for a solution because people in rural Gabon are suffering, particularly because of the elephant issue. As we analyze it, we're convinced that poaching is part of the problem. We've had poaching in remote forests, and that has pushed the elephants out of their forest home towards people, where almost all our poaching is cross-border. It's not Gabonese poachers. And so the elephants are safer close to people's villages, which the poachers tend to avoid, than they are out in the forest, in some parts of Gabon, not in all parts of Gabon. The other issue that we're starting to understand is that climate change is impacting the forests of the Congo Basin. There's one study in the tropics, not just in Africa, but in the tropics, where we have 40 years of weather data and fruiting phenology of rainforest trees and data on elephants in Lope National Park. And we've seen over the last 40 years, we've seen a 80% drop in fruiting of rainforest plants producing succulent fruits. And we were able to publish a paper in Science last year where we showed that the elephants have become thinner over that time. So thousands of photographs were analyzed, and the elephants today, their ribs are sticking out more, their backbones are sticking out more. And so it seems that climate change is starting to impact the biology of the rainforest plants. We're seeing less fruit available for the forest elephants. They're getting hungry, and we're starting to think that this phenomenon is actually a product of climate change, and that these hungry elephants are coming out of their rainforest home looking for food in people's plantations. And so it's actually beginning to look like it's a climate change adaptation issue. And that's just another reminder that we cannot separate these issues of biodiversity and climate change. The end result is crop raiding is on the increase everywhere. Rural people are angry. I'm being pressurized every day in Parliament and elsewhere to kill elephants, find solutions to this problem. It's getting to the point where it's starting to impact public support and parliamentary support for other biodiversity conservation issues. And so as is the case in Kenya, we need help, we need technical help, we need support to build electric fences, to get teams out into the field to better understand the problem, to really take this issue seriously, because we are losing the support of our public for all of the other incredibly important conservation actions and initiatives that we need to undertake. Yeah. When I talk to Parliament, when I talk within government about creating new protected areas, about the High Ambition Coalition for Nature, creating 30% protected areas on land and sea by 2030, everybody says, well, that's all fine, Lee, but what about human-elephant conflict? What about human-wildlife conflict? So this film is important. It's important to educate both, the public in the developed world who think of these incredible species as amazingly positive. It's important to educate people that have to live with them don't necessarily like living with them. It's important to understand the complexities of combining, juggling nature preservation, conservation, and dealing with these human wildlife impacts. And yeah, I guess if we look at it in a more broadly, we're living through this coronavirus pandemic, a virus that came from wildlife. And so if we extend our thinking about human-wildlife conflicts to human-wildlife disease and impacts both of our aggressions against nature and of climate change on human-wildlife disease issues, I think this is going to be one of the issues we're going to all be talking about a lot for the coming years. And so great effort on behalf of the filmmakers, great effort on part of EPI for making, bringing us together and highlighting this issue, and let's all work together to think about how we can creatively solve this issue and mediate and compensate where necessary and invest in methods to keep wildlife and humans apart where we need to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor White. Thank you even for that great effort to join us in between your very, very busy schedule. And you bring up some really important issues, the impacts of climate change, the fact that we do need to have a One Health approach to all these issues, the fact that it is complex. It's a complex issue that we're dealing with, and indeed the film did bring that up. Now, I'm going to invite Grant Baden. You saw him in action on the film. He's going to talk to us. He's got 4 minutes, so I'm not going to take his time. Grant, there you go.
Hi, Winnie. Thank you very much, and greetings to everyone, and thank you for joining us today to take a look into this human-elephant conflict issue and what it means to all the players involved. My name's Grant Burden. I've recently joined the EPI to take a deeper dive into some of the human-elephant conflict issues in Africa and how and where we can best mitigate against them. So far we've heard about the HEC in sort of the broader perspective, HEC at a national or regional level. I'd like to maybe just bring the focus back to sort of more of a local level, and in particular where the area where Living on the Edge was filmed, the film we just watched, where it played out. I think one of the key issues with this film is the importance, or highlighting the importance of raising awareness with a high level of empathy. We don't just talk about it or know about the issue. We actually live and feel the issue every day, where the film was made. So you get to really appreciate both sides of the story, the conservation aspect of it in terms of protecting animals and how important that is, and the importance of that for the habitat in which they are found, and then the people on your borders, and how critical it is to to take into account the pain and anguish that they feel when when they're up against these conflict issues. I think in this day and age, it's undoubtedly clear that we can't afford further losses of the global biodiversity that we have, and protected area state that we have. Human wildlife conflict mitigation, monitoring, management has to be at the forefront of all protected area managers' minds and thoughts and actions, and this can manifest itself in a myriad of different ways, because it is such a complex issue that we got to think outside the box in terms of bringing this issue under control. The importance of the awareness that we can bring about this issue through the actions of many local and foreign NGOs. Even a good example is the black bean production video that we've just seen, is to be able to bring solutions within reach of local communities. Without that, we can talk about solutions. There's been a few comments about, we know what it is to be done and why aren't we doing it? It's not rocket science. It's a really simple approach that can be taken to dealing with humans and elephants. And by and large, the separation of humans and elephants is critical, and that can happen within ecosystems, within small areas. You can still have humans and elephants living alongside one another, but separated through barriers and just innovative thinking, and that's the way forward. That's where we got to go. We can't afford to be too much on one side or the other, both in communities or elephants, because everyone is important. And at the end of the day, the solutions to this problem has to be a sort of an overarching element. And so I just like to maybe hand over back to Winnie, and look forward to taking on some questions and hopefully getting some answers out there that will keep everyone thinking about this issue.
Thank you very much, Grant. And now our last speaker for this afternoon before we go into the Q&A, and I hope you're firing away in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Greta has been given the very unenviable role of leading the charge in the EPI with delivering the vision on human-elephant conflict. Now, Greta, go for it.
Thank you, Winnie. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests and colleagues, thank you so much. Today we've heard some really important and heartbreaking comments from my fellow panelists, but we've also seen Black Beans Productions Living on the Edge documentary, which really hits home as a conservationist. There are no simple solutions. As human, agricultural, industrial, and climatic pressures continue to increase on our natural resources, including the consequences which stem from our vast structures of capitalism and consumption, the reality is that wildlife and nature will simply not congregate where we expect to find it. And just as we do, wildlife will continue to adapt to threats in order to survive, often ending in fatal encounters as we've seen today. It's clear that we must seek transformative ways forward, rooted in environmental, racial, and social justice, strategies that acknowledge the severe inequality, poverty, contested land use, and also deeply rooted conflicts which continue to uphold and expand in and around protected areas, and where humans and non-humans compete for resources to survive. Most of the protected areas in my home country of Ethiopia and across the Horn of Africa are managed on painfully inadequate state funds, never generating enough revenue to even come close to covering the operating costs needed to secure these vital ecosystems. let alone mitigate human-wildlife conflict or provide benefits and compensation for local communities. Decades of disputes over territory, insecurity, drought, lack of governance and resources often deprioritizes nature, wildlife, and ecological conservation efforts, especially in areas where wildlife economies are non-existent. So how do we do it? How do we tackle such a colossal issue and at a time where our society is also battling the effects of a devastating global pandemic? I believe we must go back to the drawing board. We cannot be afraid to admit that we have to reflect, revise, challenge, and adapt the way we create, uphold, and manage protected area systems and land use as a whole in these new lived realities. We will never succeed if we only protect biodiversity for biodiversity's sake, or if we believe that we can create structures that move beyond the age of humans. We must instead have courage as conservationists, as leaders, as human beings, to define new ways of coexisting with each other. No one size fits all, especially for how we mitigate and reduce human-wildlife conflict across landscapes. We must influence policy, leaders, and ourselves to tackle the social inequality perpetuated by unequal access to natural resource management, including sometimes when they're fueled by the protected areas themselves. Site-specific technical solutions are vital to buy us time, to build trust, to show commitment, and save specific individuals and elephants from lethal circumstances. But we must wholeheartedly commit to tackling the far more complex root causes, the social, political, economic, historic, and cultural factors that require us to become uncomfortable, to make sacrifices, and inspire effective political alliances. Alliances that truly help dismantle the structures undermining both our planet and our people. We must work together to center and empower the people who bear the brunt of the problem, while tackling the immense long-term issues from a place of empathy, vulnerability, collaboration, and accountability. It won't be easy, and as Professor Lee White said, it's likely going to be a challenge that we will work on for a very long time, if not my whole life. But I believe every person on this call is here because we feel an overwhelming responsibility to not abandon the cause, irrespective of how much it scares us or how challenging it may be. We are still here. We have not lost this fight, and most importantly, we will not give up. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Greta. Now, I have questions, and I'm going to address myself to Minister Balala. There are two questions that are related, and indeed, Greta has addressed herself to this issue several times. One question is from Patricia Worry, who you know very well, Mr. Balala. How to get to the bottom of the problem? Why is human-wildlife conflict getting worse when wildlife populations are reducing? Before you answer that, let me ask you again another question from Kenya. Donna Shepherd asks, can you comment on the challenges of the growing human population as one of the driving factors of this increasing human-wildlife pressure? It seems that we humans are just taking more and more of the world's habitats. So animals are reducing, conflict is increasing. Human populations are increasing. It seems like humans are taking the habitats. Honorable Balala, I think you are the best person to answer this question.
Thank you very much, Winnie, and thank you, Pat. Definitely population increase. I think our population in 1963 was 7 million people. Now we are 47 million people. Yeah. Do we expect the same space to be available for wildlife? No. People now are more empowered, they can afford. That's why if you went to Masai Mara today, or you went to Kajiado, for example, Amboseli today, the amount of people who are buying land and they want that land for agriculture. And you know, there's the biggest issue about the avocado issue in Amboseli. And collectively with you, Winnie, and others, we managed to get this thing stopped. Otherwise, we are going to block corridors. But also we need to think seriously. It might not be politically correct, but probably we need to think about the model of conservation in this country, or maybe in the continent of Africa. Free range wildlife conservation might not necessarily be a program that is good for conservation. We need protected areas. We need to make sure that wildlife are in protected areas, not anywhere and everywhere. We have seen in this film, I think Grant and the team showed it, that fencing is one of the solutions. That is one to protect humans and wildlife. But again, we need to know where are these areas, where are the corridors, so we can protect them so that they don't go off track and attack farms. Again, climate change is a major problem. Climate change, because as Professor Lee said, yeah, even the elephants in Gabon are becoming thinner. It's because the quality of nutrition of the food that they are receiving, because of climate change. And there is we cannot stop the greed of human beings, unfortunately, because of human population increasing, and because every country wants to develop and they want to build infrastructure and they want to build industries. These are realities. We who are in the conservation field are being seen to be the enemies of the people because we want, or maybe we are very slow in reacting to challenges. And that's why I'm so happy today EPI has brought the issue of human-wildlife conflict in as an important agenda. And this agenda needs to be escalated internationally to create the importance of it, the way we created the importance of poaching. So yes, it's a challenge. Solutions are not that easy because you have to balance. You want conservation, you want space for wildlife, but also you have to be sensitive. Humans are there competing, and the issue of food security is another issue. Those are the issues that are complicated than we can imagine.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I don't know if any of the panelists wants to comment on it, but actually let me get Grant and Greta to speak directly to this issue of fences, beehives, the solutions that we seem to have, that we are trying at the moment. We have a lot of questions on fences and beehives. Greta, Grant, how expensive are these solutions? How practical are they? Are they short-term techniques, or can we use them as indeed long-term measures to deal with conflict? Any of you can answer these questions.
I can jump in there quickly, Greta, and just comment maybe on the more sort of permanent fencing solution that does not involve beehives. You know, there's many different ways in which you can erect a barrier to separate humans and elephants to reduce this issue of conflict. If you're looking at building a fence, a permanent barrier, you know, it is just that it is permanent with a certain degree of maintenance and a replacement regime that can span, you know, anything from 10 to 20 years for certain components of that fence. The fence can be put up as a permanent solution to human-elephant conflict in separating humans and elephants. And the cost of these fences can range from anywhere between $1,000 to $10,000 a kilometer, depending on the design of the fence and the complexity of the construction. You know, certain areas flat and level with, you know, without accessibility challenges are really easy to deal with. You have certain areas where human-elephant conflict is rife, but it is very wet, swampy areas or hilly, rocky, mountainous areas. So there's a lot of different aspects that come into play when you are planning a fence and costing it. And there's a certain level of technical expertise that is required to put up a fence of such a nature. And the maintenance of these fences is absolutely critical. Elephants are extremely clever animals, and you know, they learn very quickly. It doesn't take them long to figure out what we as humans are putting up in their path to try and stop them from what they really want to get at. So the maintenance of these fences, all of which should be and would be electrified, is critical. You know, you get an opportunity for an elephant to deal with a fence that has lost its electrical component through shorts or breakages or anything like that. Those elephants will learn really, really quickly that this is actually not an impermeable barrier or impenetrable, and they will be able to get through it. So the management of these fences is critical. And yeah, so that's just a look at sort of one aspect of fencing. I don't know, Greta, if you wanna tell us more about the bee fences or chili fences or all these other sort of different versions of barriers which can be created to try and stop elephants. I'll let you jump in.
Thank you, Grant. Very good points made, and I think I'll play a little bit devil's advocate and present a case from Ethiopia where absolutely these mitigation strategies, whether they're fences, beehives, trenches, whatever they may be, they're very effective in some places, but they're very site specific to the realities of that area. In Ethiopia, a lot of our protected areas, elephants are actually moving outside of the protected area system because of the degradation of their habitats, because they do not have access to quality food, access to resources. Sometimes entire settlements also looking for access to water and food have taken over the core habitats of these elephants. Therefore, when you think of putting fences around protected areas, you're really actually fencing in elephants in areas that they cannot survive. And this is a challenge that I think we will see increasingly in the Horn of Africa, where mitigation strategies sometimes are static. And as Grant has mentioned, elephants and wildlife in general are very dynamic. They're resilient, they're determined, especially elephants, charismatic, but incredibly determined. And therefore, they will continue to break out of these fenced areas. No matter how much we try and separate humans and wildlife, we are going to both be struggling to survive and having access to natural resources. That is why it goes back to the point of we can't just tackle surface solutions. A fence is a mitigation strategy that can help in some locations, but on the whole, as populations continue to increase, as resources continue to dwindle, and as Honorable Najib Balala mentioned, as climate change also completely impacts and shapes what protected areas will look like, not just 5 or 10 years down the line, but 20, 30, 50 years down the line, we need to dream bigger. We need to recognize that the challenges are only going to be increasing. And that's why we have to really push up the ladder. We need to talk to leaders about how we develop land use, about how we actually tackle the issue. If protected areas become completely degraded, do we just give up on wildlife? Do we let humans take over the land? Do we let wildlife take over the land? There's so many challenges embedded in our governance issues that we must tackle at the same time, simultaneously. And these strategies, these mitigation strategies are important in the short term, but we must not lose sight of the prize. We must not lose sight of the long term about how we're going to stop this becoming a problem over and over again as time goes on.
Probably, Winnie, I can quickly jump here, 1 minute only.
Yes.
Please.
Yeah.
I think the mitigation measures of fences and chilies and all these issues are being practiced now, and they're helping, but they're not solutions. Yeah, I think I want to agree with Greta that we need to invest heavily on addressing the climate change issues in protected areas. So wildlife do not leave the protected areas. Otherwise, we cannot expand. Currently, we cannot expand protected areas. Despite we want to create corridors, despite we want to create more conservancies in Kenya, yeah, but really is a challenge, And yes, despite we want all this for the wildlife, but the reality on the ground is being resisted. I tell you an example, in the last 1 year during COVID, we had more challenges of human-wildlife conflict. More elephants are being killed, human-wildlife conflict, than even we can imagine the last 5 years of elephants died out of poaching. So we are worried. We in Kenya are worried. Our numbers are going up of elephants, but we need to come with serious issues, serious solutions. So one of the things that we try to address to the public and to get a buy-in, that we are actually now doing the compensation. So money is coming to the communities, that they get compensated, but that's not enough. Also, this issue is political, as Professor Lee White, he says. We as ministers get harassed in parliament because their constituencies are harassing their leaders. I know members of parliament who lost their parliamentary seats because of issues of human-wildlife conflicts. Every time when I travel in the countryside and I go to areas where, particularly Amboseli and Kajiado, yeah, most of the leaders are complaining that they don't see the benefit of wildlife and conservation. Despite they get all the benefits of healthcare, education, and everything, but they feel they are losing much more than conservation. So these issues are real issues. We need to create, again, we need to create seriousness in the agenda or dialogue on human wildlife. We should stop romanticizing about the issue. The issue is real and we need to address it. Thank you very much, Winnie.
Honorable Balala, you have actually answered the two questions that I had reserved for you. There was a question from Will Travers exactly on differentiating between human-wildlife conflict and poaching. And you have just told us that we are losing a lot of wildlife, a lot of elephants and other wildlife to human-wildlife conflict. And indeed, if it's taking more of our animals and poaching, this is a serious issue that we do need to address. And there was another question on compensation, which you have addressed yourself to. And perhaps as we go towards wrapping up, because we still have you, I'm going to ask you a question which often comes up. This is to do with government, because we sometimes feel like government operates in silos. How do we bring this conversation to the level where the minister in charge of infrastructure, the minister that is in charge of agriculture, the minister for finance, and yourself, sir, are able to sit at the table and really do a serious deep dive into these issues so that financing from government goes to the right places. Infrastructure does not exacerbate human-wildlife conflict. Minister, how can we get government to speak to the same language to one another? Thank you.
Winnie and colleagues, yes, it's true. Government works in silos, but of late, we in government in Kenya here, we try to coordinate things together. I have been championing the issue of establishing a cabinet committee on infrastructure versus conservation. So far, it's been accepted in my government, in cabinet. We are working toward that. It's just the beginning. It has its teething problems. But yes, the issues, for example, like the Kenya Power Lighting's poles that has affected giraffes in Soisambu. Yeah, why would it happen? Why can't you consult? And we are on the ground. But now we have understood we have to work together as a team. The issue of approval of avocado farm, for example. Why does NEMA give an approval? And we have said no until the tribunal intervenes. Those are the issues. Yeah. So we in Kenya now, we are slowly coming to understand that we have to work together. Without working together, we're going to have disasters. It's not just about saving wildlife. It's about the projects will be rejected by the people and by conservation activists. Yeah, a good example is SGR. Yeah, we have achieved it. We have done it. I think if we did more consultation prior to the project, we would have gotten a better solution. But now it is done. It's been mitigated very well. But also we need to balance between development, between agriculture, and between conservation. But I have taken the challenge myself. My colleagues in government are very supportive. Yes, it's not as formal as you can imagine, but we are getting there. And we are going to formalize this issue of a multi-agency engagement of government, particularly when it comes to infrastructure development. Thank you very much.
So we are getting to the end of this discussion, regrettably, because we really, the questions here have been so fantastic. But we have a panelist from Liberia. And before I ask John to wrap up the session, I'm looking for the question from Liberia. And Barnaby, can you put that question for me in the, because I'm missing the question from Liberia, and I want to really ask it because this is the first panelist that we have asking us a question that is not from East Africa, and I don't want to miss this question. Good, I found it. So putting poaching, ivory, bushmeat elephants aside, what does the panel feel is one of the most important steps we can take as soon as possible in reversing human-elephant conflict right now? What can we do now? Any of the panelists have a quick solution? They're all looking at me like there's no quick solution.
I can jump in just really quickly, Winnie. There is no silver bullet. You know, this is such a complex issue. But if we look at it sort of at a very high level, the root of the problem is when humans and elephants, sort of are in contact with each other at a particular interface, and the separation of humans and elephants goes a very, very long way in dealing with the conflict issue in itself. So if you look at it at a very high level, sort of bird's eye view, there's separation of humans and elephants through building of barriers, which can come in, as we've already seen in this discussion, in very in a diverse forms, from chili fences, bee fences, to electrical wire fences, to elephant translocations. It's something that's not very much talked about. It's not a simple feat, moving up to 6-ton large land mammals any distances. And then the question that arises there as well is, well, are you simply not just moving the problem from one area to another area? So there's a lot to be thought about there, but the fact remains is that it is possible, and it is a solution. And then, the solution that Professor Lee, spoke about as well, and something that he is being forced to deal with, questions that he's been asked on the killing of elephant. It's we see it on the ground in the form of retaliatory killings, an eye for an eye. And it goes right up to sort of ministerial level. And I'm sure Honorary Balala has been sort of pushed into a corner, and many times before. He's saying in terms of this eye for an eye approach, which, as we've all agreed and spoken about on this call already, that the global biodiversity loss and the rate at which it's happening, and the protected area state and how it's shrinking, and the global population is increasing, there's just no room for that, really. So so that's in terms of what we can do right now. The two sort of aspects that really stick out is the separation of humans and elephants through barriers that have been wisely thought out, and then possibly the movement of elephants. That's, like I say, here and now. Greta has given reference to the way bigger picture of land use planning and opening up corridors and things for elephants to move to decrease the pressure there. So that's a whole nother avenue to explore. But probably way more long term.
Grant, I think you've done a presentation on this. I think is not a simple solution. It will take time. The mitigation measures that have been mentioned here today are short term, or they can work now, but not in the long term. I think, as I said earlier, again, this dialogue needs to go at another level. It's about financing. It's about mapping. Yeah. It's about also taking a bold decision where this area is for conservation. No other businesses can be brought here. The other businesses can be relocated to other areas. Those corridors need to be protected. Protected areas need to be sufficient in terms of pasture and protected enough so that wildlife can remain there. I want also at this juncture to congratulate most of the communities that are living with wildlife, particularly the Maasai communities, both in Narok and both in Kajiado. Yeah, there has been a lot of coexistence, and I want to congratulate the NGOs and the international community that are working there. They have helped in making understanding the value of coexistence. Yeah, all our partners, they played a major role. Areas where I see where people have not understood is area which is already been cultivated for agriculture. And then there is an invasion because of drought, or there is an invasion because of lack of good food in protected areas. There is where the challenges are. But let's appreciate the communities so far have sustained the burden of human-wildlife conflict, and we need to appreciate them, but we need to do much more to mitigate for them. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that we can go on up to late this evening, and we've had a fantastic panel. Thank you very much, Honorable Balala, for staying on with us. Grant, Greta, we thank Honorable Lee White in absentia. He's missing out the questions that are coming from the French-speaking panelists or French-speaking participants. I have a number of questions here that are in French. I would have translated them, but at the moment I will save myself this because Lee White is not here. And indeed, this has been a wonderful discussion. We cannot finish this issue in one afternoon. And I am now going to invite John Scanlon to make some concluding remarks, as I am sure all those people participating here will agree with me that this issue is big. We need to continue talking about it, and this is just the beginning. Thank you very much. Please give our panelists a hand clap. You can use the reaction to clap for our panelists, or you can tweet. You can go to Twitter and clap for them there. Thank you very much. We've had a wonderful afternoon. Karibu, John.
Thank you very much, Winnie, and thanks for so brilliantly moderating this panel discussion. I don't think we could have had a more articulate, passionate, committed, or knowledgeable group of people together to really highlight this issue. And Honourable Balala, I was really taken by your comments, and Kenya has clearly tamed poaching, as you told us. But this human wildlife and human elephant conflict is the greatest threat to conservation, in particular elephants. But I think what struck me, and this was reinforced by Professor White, is that we must address these issues now, or we cannot get the goodwill of local people. And I think that is something all panelists stressed about, the goodwill of local people, the benefits to local people, and working with them. I certainly do hope that as a result of today, seeing the film and hearing from our extraordinary panelists, we all have a better appreciation of the scale, nature, and consequences of human-elephant conflict and what needs to be done. Minister, I think you made it very clear that we're going to need to take this to another level. It's very clear from what you've said, what Professor White said, from what we're seeing from all of our member states, this is a serious issue, a serious political issue, as well as a financial issue and a local issue. So we're going to have to better embed it into the international discourse, into the international discussion, and get a much better response. I was also struck, Honourable Balala, by what you said about balance. This is about coexistence, harmonious coexistence, and striking a balance. And I think that's what the Elephant Protection Initiative is trying to do, work with its member states to strike the right balance and come up with solutions that can draw upon experience from other places, but recognize that each solution is going to be particular to a specific place. And perhaps what was also striking is that there are some short-term interventions that can be made to deal with an immediate problem, but it's much deeper than short-term interventions if we're going to have enduring solutions. So very grateful to all of our panelists, in particular to you, Honourable Balala, for joining us. You're such a champion of these issues. We see you everywhere, not just domestically, but internationally, including in the wildlife space. And the same for Professor White, again, very committed to his own country, but we also see him in the international space on biodiversity and climate. And I think here we had an opportunity to connect this critical issue to the broader issues of biodiversity, climate, and the whole issue of pandemics and local benefits deriving from living within and amongst wildlife. So with that, thank you all. I was struck that we kept all of our participants over 100, 200 for the whole time. Millions of questions came in. Sorry we couldn't get to them all. I think we've stimulated a very important discussion. It's just starting. It's not concluding today. Thanks again, Winnie. Brilliant moderation. Minister, brilliant as also. And thanks to Grant and Greta from our wonderful team. Thank you all for joining us.
Bye-bye.